having released 2 albums on the same day, with a combined total of 46 tracks, with Environment 6 and 6.5 in October 2016, the Future Sound of London might be forgiven for taking a bit of a rest. However, that is very clearly not the way things were going with FSOLDigital, and so began another chapter of the Future Sound of London. With 2017, conventional release formats and schedules went out of the window, and creativity ramped up yet another notch. And that's what we'll be looking at today on Earthbeat Visions, a history of the future sound of London. Regular listeners and viewers will know I sometimes mess up the timelines a little bit, and I'm going to once again say here we are, we're just going to quickly have a peek at some library music from 2016, Jazzstep. In 2016, the band were back working with Extreme Music for the latest entry in the X series for a collection of funk and jazz inspired breaks and house tracks credited to Brian, Gaz and Will White. Unusually, this album has since been released to digital services such as iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, etc., making it the first of the band's library releases to get a commercial release. However, not much here really sounds like FSOL, it's clearly all very much intended for the library music market. Tracks include Dark City, which is authentically jazzy sounding, Contact Heist, with Will White's influence very obvious here, a strong propeller heads feel, Chunky Funky, a track that not in a million years would I have guessed was FSOL related, nor Gone Fishing. Bugbeats and Tripletone, The Research Remixed. The last known selection of library music pieces to date is another remix album by Robin Appleton's Tripletone project, reworked by FSOL and Will White again as Bugbeats. This led to the formation of the AI project, which I'll be talking about very soon, and the tracks here are largely built around the same commercial sounding TV music direction. All the tracks are released as full versions and stripped back underscores. As with Jazzstep, this album has since been released through most major digital distribution sites, making it available for fans to purchase. It's mostly quite mellow material, beautiful modern classical ambience on I Felt, and Morning Mists of Obscurity first appeared on the second Touch Music FSOL night as Morning Mist. And now back to 2017, starting with FSOLDigital presents 2017 Calendar album. Release date 6th October 2017, calendar 17th January to 20th December 2017, tracks. This is where things start to get a bit silly. The 2017 FSOLDigital calendar was made available for pre-order at the same time as Environment 6 and 6.5. It's a lovely idea, a calendar featuring 12 original images by the band and Buggy, and the concept of a calendar album created by 12 tracks released over the course of the year once a month is fairly original and an excellent use of digital distribution. That said, releasing 46 tracks on one day and then saying, oh, and there'll be another 12 tracks next year on top of everything else we release is, well, a bit overwhelming. I think for quite a few fans there's a turning point where they lose the ability to keep up with every release, every track, every title. For me, as I said last week, Environment 6 Plus is the limit where it comes to titles. I can never remember more than about half of them. But the 2017 calendar album marks the moment where I begin to lose the ability to immediately identify every track. This is partially because the albums, regardless of alias, have generally been structured and pieced together as individual works, so having their records spread out over the course of a year seems to remove them from that context and thus strip them of a little of their identity. Couple this with the vast amount of music coming out by this point in their career, and of course the average age of listeners, myself very much so in this case, it just grows increasingly difficult to get to know each piece in quite the same way that it was with earlier tracks. Complaints aside, the calendar album concept is a generally pretty cool idea, and it allows the band to put out interesting asides, offcuts, one-off experiments without sidelining them for appropriate albums or leaving them unreleased altogether. Given just how many archive pieces have been released and how many still exist unheard, it's nice to have a peek at what would otherwise probably be unheard tracks. In that sense, I tend to approach the albums more like from the archive records and the side projects, These aren't really fighting to be compared with, say, Lifeforms or Environment 5. Given the monthly release schedule, they originally played with gaps between the tracks for the most part. The first two on the 2017 album do attempt a thematic link though, closing and opening with the same environment. The original idea came about as doing a calendar simply to celebrate the artworks, the various art that had been made by the band and Buggy over the years, from back in the 90s and right up to the then present day. It was in fact Brian's wife, Lisa Bartlett, who suggested the monthly track subscription. This worked well as, much with the Life in Moments album released with the most important moments of a life book, the music could effectively be released without paying the usual VAT on it. This financial benefit could then be passed on to both the band and fans. Most of the music from the various calendar albums over the years is pulled from the archives, but some are actually written and finished a day before release. The 2017 calendar album is the first release to have the at least vague subtitle FSOLDigital Presents. This marks it out as something slightly different from a traditional FSOL album. Once again compared with something like Lifeforms or Environment 5, which are very much direct, concise statements by the future sound of London, here things are a little bit more varied, a little bit more vague. This is at least in part because of the number of different aliases that appear on the albums, but it also sets them aside as a different part of the band's catalogue, belonging to a separate stream of albums, EPs and mixes that run alongside the main FSOL releases. This was only the first of many that have come out since. The first track was released on the 17th of January 2017, the day matching the year, an email sent to all subscribers stating this month's track is by the future sound of London. Up until this point it was expected the whole album would be FSOL, but this description suggested that maybe alias releases would be included, and indeed the third track comes from Black Hill Transmitter, with pieces by Indo Tribe, Humanoid and Yage later on. Each track comes with its own artwork embedded in the MP3 tag, and sometimes a description of the track when it was created and such. For the 2017 album, Black Hill Transmitter's 17th came with a notice that it was from a forthcoming Black Hill Transmitter EP that has yet to surface. Shrinking World was announced to be part of From the Archives Volume 9, on which it didn't appear, and Yage's App Back was listed as part of forthcoming album Nam 71. It eventually ended up on the Pygmy EP 3 years later. It's all part of the FSOL jigsaw, I suppose. In May, a digital-only subscription was made available. Some fans had missed the physical calendar and still wanted to buy the music, the band happily complying. By June, the tracks started arriving a little later than the 17th. In September, a montage of all 9 tracks to date, including the then forthcoming Commensalism, was added to Brian's Facebook, the first time a calendar track had been announced before release. Propagate and Riverbed both went on to feature on From the Archives Volume 9 and the Music from Calendars compilation, joined on the latter by Commensalism. App Back, as previously mentioned, would later appear on Pygmy. These shared tracks contribute to the slightly unfocused nature of the record, with pieces no longer feeling specific to their individual albums. That said, on the whole, it's a pretty strong selection of tracks, easily up there with the better volumes of the From the Archive series and the band's side projects. Stylistically, it's pretty varied, with everything from dark jazz to IDM, lo-fi breaks to acoustic ambience, with tracks ranging from 93 to 2016. With the launch of the FSOL Bandcamp in 2020, the album was finally made available to purchase in lossless format, and with all tracks mixed together joined gaplessly with various different environments and crossfades. The calendar itself is a lovely object. The cover features a bizarre image of a faceless woman, the text Boombox over the top, with an orbital path sketched around her. An LP label from Environments replaces her mouth. The band name utilises the same font as Life in Moments, and a new run of emblems and logos, curves, hexagon, earthbeat, herd killing and globules, appears at the bottom, as well as on each month's page. January is represented by artwork from Environments 2, as well as what looks like a photograph of a tower or transmitting mast. February features a booklet image from the Environments 6.5 CD. March's page is a montage of numerous From the Archives booklet images, as well as a new photograph of a cave on a beach. April shows the Environments 4 LP cover. May features the Archive Date front and back covers. June includes the trees photograph, first seen under the disc of the CD edition of Environments 6.5. July's image is the calendar's front cover. August is the first month to include entirely new art, with an Environment 6.5 style warped image of a partially demolished building. No doubt, once again, Brian experimenting with Boogie's photos. September's picture is of a path through long grass previously seen on page 13 of Artworks 1. The band name appears in the Life in Moments font once again, with further text reading Future Sound and Vision in the usual FSOL font. The linked Squares Environments logo is also present alongside another unseen graphic. October features a number of images including smashed glass photos first seen in the Dead City's 192-page book, a strangely manipulated mountain shot, a 3D pyramid model with Japanese text reading Broken Sky, a wireframe of spiky and art sound technology as first seen on the artwork for Cascade. November is represented by another montage of images, including a familiar looking underpass, a Dead Cities era photo of a wall, some humanoid glitches, and a concrete staircase with the FSOLDigital style water damage splatter texture. The year closes on December's page with two spikies floating over an Environment 6.5 image. Although many of the pictures are already familiar, they all make nice images to have on the wall each month. Given their strong visual identity and interest in multimedia, in some ways it's pretty surprising that the band hadn't come up with the idea earlier. The Future Sound of London, Shorelines. Hello purchasers of the 2017 calendar from FSOLDigital. The first track from the monthly series is now available and can be downloaded here. The first track is by the Future Sound of London and is called Shorelines. We hope you enjoy. FSOLDigital. Shorelines was delivered on 17th January 17 as the first track in the band's calendar album series as a 160 kilobits per second MP3. The following day the error was corrected with a 320k copy sent out again. Starting to mean to go on, I suppose. Many of the early calendar tracks came with no real information attached, and thus it's hard to ascertain when the track comes from. It's 97 or later as it contains several samples shared with the Glacier family of tracks, Glacier Part 1 and 2, Fibrillation, Plough and Standing Room, as well as being generally somewhat acoustic sounding in nature. As well as woodwind, the piece contains odd yelping samples and synth bass and a fast jazzy drum loop. The jazz side of the band's sound is not often discussed but appears fairly regularly, and this is an excellent example. The final 2 minutes of the track are an ambient environment with fluttering synths and field recordings. An alternate version later appeared up on archived environmental views as Sea Pig. The accompanying art is of a misty forest scene, shaded in what I can only describe as toxic waste yellow, featuring the EBV, Herd Killing and Curves logos. The Future Sound of London, Docks 2. Docks 2 picks up where Shorelines left off, with an opening environment based around Sea Pig. This is a rare example of attempts to tie calendar tracks together in normal FSOL gapless style, at least before the Bandcamp retcon. After some field recordings and crow sounds, the track starts in earnest and is very clearly an Environment 6 plus outtake, with the typical sound of those sessions, punchy drum machine beats, layers of synth arpeggios and pads, a generally melancholic feel. I prefer it to some tracks on those albums in fact. It closes with a brief environment of synth pads and vocal samples. The track's embedded art features overlaid photographs with a typically FSOLDigital style worn look. A version without the environments appeared on the Touched compilation Touched Electronics 001. Black Hill Transmitter, 17th. A fitting title for a track released on 17th of March 2017. This time Black Hill Transmitter have kindly donated a track from their latest studio sessions. If you click here you can download the track 17th. Black Hill Transmitter's new EP will be available soon. Black Hill Transmitter's new EP was not released soon. More than 8 years on and there's been no more releases from the project. I do like the description of it, harking back to the Passion Music days where artists were at least vaguely promoted as being totally different musicians in the aid of world building. Doomy electric bass, slow drums and layers of pitch black synths, the 17th is a bit slower than your average Black Hill Transmitter track, but the layers of live instrumentation fit in well with the project's overall sound. The sepia photos on the embedded image are fittingly 70s looking. It closes with a minute-long environment, unusual for Black Hill Transmitter, of crumbling sounds, chopped-up granular voice samples and more synth pads. Indo Tribe, Quays. Hello again, FSOL calendar purchasers. You'll be pleased to hear that the next track in the monthly series is now available to download. This month it's our old friends from the Pulse EPs, Indo Tribe, with what sounds like 1993 and a track called Quays. We hope you enjoy. FSOLDigital. A bit late for Indo Tribe 1993, but I'm not going to complain about the first Indo Tribe track in 25 years. There are definitely some early 90s pads in there, but interestingly the bulk of the track uses the same range of samples as Just a Fucking Idiot, percussion, breathy sounds, bleeps and other weird noises, to the extent that it practically sounds like a remix. Makes you wonder just how long the original track was around, or how many times Brian and Gaz returned to old collections of samples. Those jazzy synth pads make it far less bleak than that 1994 track though. The art is a typical FSOLDigital era blend of worn, rustic imagery. Humanoid Propagate. This is an odd one. An early release from the 21st Century Humanoid Sessions, released as the May 2017 calendar track, there was initially some surprise at just how much it sounds like something from Environment 6.5, complete with the thick compressed production. Undoubtedly, the sessions for that and the Humanoid album recorded at the time fed into each other. Reversed electronic sounds, plinky synths and dramatic orchestral samples act as a closing environment. The following year it ended up on From the Archives Volume 9 as an FSOL track, minus the outro environment, the second ever confirmed Brian solo track on an FSOL release. Given the moody melodic sound, it seemed that it had been reassigned as FSOL, and then a few months later it appeared on a compilation called Contrapunct 05, labelled once again as Humanoid. In 2021 it was included on Music from Calendars as Humanoid again, with a shortened outro environment. Very strange. The colourful attached artwork is the only example, to the best of my knowledge, of a Humanoid title appearing in Eurostyle Extended. The Future Sound of London, Shrinking World. June 2017's calendar track was announced to be part of From the Archives Volume 9. While two other tracks on the 2017 calendar album ended up on that record without being announced from it, Shrinking World did not. A lot can happen in a year. If I had to place the track, I'd say it's a mid-90s piece, maybe recorded in 94, dramatically reworked and added to during the Environment 6 sessions. Environment 6 synths are all present, as is the gloomy sound, but the drums have a very 90s FSOL sampled sound to them. Interestingly, it closes not with an outer environment so much as a totally different second half, with the final 3 minutes being disorienting oscillations and beautiful synth pads. Effectively two largely unrelated pieces jammed together, much like Lifeform Ends. The Future Sound of London, Riverbed. Riverbed is July 2017's calendar track and finds the band returning to guitar-led ambience. Acoustic fingerpicking, electric guitar riffs, warm synth arpeggios, some unusual samples, possibly a baby laughing, and a flute melody. It's a warm, uplifting and beautiful sounding piece, and one that sounds very much of the Environment's era. Had it been recorded in the early noughties, it could easily have found a comfortable place on an Amorphous album, despite all its synths. Clearly a popular track within official circles, it later appeared on both From the Archives Volume 9 and Music from Calendars. The embedded artwork features, unsurprisingly, photos of a riverbed. future sound of London, Rainy 3rd Street. I love this one. Lo-fi funeral jazz, swinging drum loop, a menacing double bass loop, ghostly synths and trumpet improv. I wish the band's jazz side would come out a little more often, especially as this gloomier end of the sound is just so good. Could be an ISDN era outtake, but the overall sound isn't quite like anything else in their catalogue. Maybe it's from the Jazz Mag sessions. The closing environment features rain field recordings, unsurprisingly, as well as a looped voice sample, a wonderfully spooky track. I was a keen advocate for this track's inclusion on Music for Calendars, but sadly it didn't happen. Commensalism. Hello FSOL calendar music people. The latest track in the monthly calendar series is now available to download here. For September, the Future Sound London have provided the track Commensalism. This track is from the 2012 tapes. We hope you enjoy FSOLDigital. The 2012 tapes. There's something really pleasing about the fact that the hundreds of unreleased pieces in the band's archives, past to present, are kept in their own albums. The title suggests it exists somewhere between Environments 4 and Environment 5, perhaps coming from similar sessions as tracks like Long Exposure, although its clanging drums and synth arpeggios would have made me immediately guess it being an Environment 6 piece. For its inclusion on Music from Calendars, it features a brief closing environment of growling synth pads. The title has a wonderful meaning: peaceful coexistence among individuals or groups having independent or different values or customs. Perhaps an excellent description of Brian and Gaz's relationship. The future sound of London, Soul 7, Mix 107. An alternate mix of Soul 7 from Environment 6 and the October 2017 calendar track. The main synth melodies and pads are the same as on the original, while the beat is much gentler and the rigid bleeps and bloops are missing. I'm not sure which version I prefer, as those odd sounds in the original give it a unique character, but the smooth sound here has more atmosphere. On first listen I was fairly unimpressed that we were simply getting an alternate take for the calendar album, but in hindsight it's nice to have these two very different versions. The title does make you wonder whether there were really 107 plus different mixes of the track made. Somehow I doubt it. When I created my own CDR of the album for home listening, I chose the track's embedded image, minus the title, as the front cover. Yage, Up Back. The opening track to the Pygmy EP first appeared 3 years earlier on the 2017 calendar album as November's entry. The first standalone Yage track in almost a decade, it initially met the expectation of sounding very much how it was expected, but on revisiting the catalogue while writing this blog, it's interesting how different it sounds in some ways. There's certainly an element of the tribal percussive sound of the woodlands of old and similar drones, but it's possible to hear how the project has taken on more than a touch of Black Hill Transmitter to its sound over the years, especially in the more lo-fi aspects, tape hiss throughout, and what sounds like some synthy sweeps. A murky, gloomy track, and an excellent one at that. For the calendar, the track was announced as being from the forthcoming album Nam 71, with appropriate cover art, but nothing has been heard of this album since. The future sound of London, Listening Room, the final track of 2017. deep, grumbling bass notes, gentle drum machine beats, minor key synth pads, a heavily compressed mix. The listening room has Environment 6.5 written all over it. It threatens to be fairly repetitive until the halfway point when an airy synth sequence comes in and the rhythm changes to something a lot slower. The first section returns and sees us through to the end, closing the album and year with a minimal and evocative piece. The art features a heavily edited picture of Shawneen, her first appearance in FSOL art for quite a few years. AI, Paradigmension. Release date 23rd June 2017. This is probably the one you've not heard of. I'll go so far as to say it's the most overlooked record in the band's entire catalogue. The project began with a library music album by Cranium Pie's Robin Appleton working under the name Tripletone. The album, The Research Remixed, contains 23 remixes of Appleton's tracks by Brian Gaz and Will White. The four then continued with the project, working together as AI, standing for Audio Intelligence, to create an original album. And this is that album. At least one biography online states that it's just Robin, Brian and Will here, suggesting Gaz's contributions are minimal, possibly more on the curational end of things, possibly just a contractual credit. But he is credited as a songwriter on all 17 tracks. The sound is somewhat reminiscent of 90s down-tempo music with mellow breakbeat loops and plenty of synth pads and arpeggios. There are occasional moments which are reminiscent of FSOL tracks from 2017, but on the whole it's fairly smooth sounding without the textures or atmospheres one would expect from the project. There are some excellent tracks on the album, but it sounds strangely anonymous a lot of the time and it's not something I return to regularly. Given that the music was made with library music at least half in mind, it's not hard to imagine these tracks being used as incidental music in TV and film rather than being sat down and listened to as a conventional album. It was released on Blurred Recordings, a label specialising in music for licensing, so although not technically a library music album in the strictest sense, it operates in a similar area. Despite the album's low-key nature, it actually garnered more press attention than FSOLDigital releases, with articles previewing tracks in Accelerator and Clash. A cyclic experience. Uplifting synth pads, a kick drum loop and fast synth arps. A cyclic experience sounds like a piece used in the climactic moment of a film or TV show where an emotional breakthrough occurs. A pleasant opening to the album. Trapeza. A fairly commercial housey sounding track with punchy beats and jazzy synth pads. Some odd synth gurgles and vocal samples add a touch of FSOL to proceedings, but in general it's a long way from expected Dougans Cobain fare. Orkney Heights. The jazzy drums of Orkney Heights have a definite Will White and FSOL vibe to them, all the bright shiny synths are another move towards a much more commercial sound. Bacterial. Bacterial sounds like a 90s ambient drum and bass track with quiet skittering beats and rich melancholic synth pads. The blending of the pads with vocal samples is very effective, giving this otherwise simplistic piece a memorably emotive feel. Primal Recurrence. Primal Recurrence sounds like a much more fleshed out version of a piece from Environmental, and more on that next week, with a rather cold, minimal feel, but layers of thick synth pads and arpeggios forming a blanket of sound, rather than that album's starker approach. Elders of Tokthi. I don't know. One of the darker sounding pieces on Paradigmension, Elders of Tokthi has an imposing sound consisting of dramatic synth pads and a slow, chugging breakbeat. The fast spacey chords would lend themselves incredibly well to science or sci-fi on screen. Arpeggios, vocals and distorted chords bring the piece to an incredibly dramatic crescendo, one of the strongest standalone pieces on Paradigmension. CCCP Street. Synth arpeggios, a harp loop, squelchy bass and quiet percussion. One of the quieter and more minimal pieces on Paradigmension with an enjoyably pensive atmosphere. Opiate Technician. A particularly abstract AI track built around slow, glitchy beats, behind which synth drones and sounds swirl. A simple robotic bass line appears in the second half of the track, adding some development to the otherwise fairly minimal piece. Tonto Equation. A dark, slightly funky breakbeat piece with a strong groove, some glitches and brooding synth chords. Could easily come from some late 90s sci-fi techno thriller B-movie. World of Change. the obligatory dub track with deep bass and uplifting synth chords. So High I Can Reach the Sun. This piece features a vintage 70s sounding electronic rhythm combined with programmed breaks and muffled synth chords. There are some very beautiful sounds in the track, especially the synth arpeggio near the end, but it feels strangely underdeveloped. Quartz Machines. A brief ambient piece of rich, warm, major key synth chords and notes. Paradigmension. Paradigmension's title track is one of the more exploratory pieces on the album, with deep synth bass notes acting as a structure around which various other synths come and go, with high-pitched bleeps, analog pads and other melodies. Silicon Repose. Slow, minimal beats and fuzzy analog bass give a slight hauntological feel to this track, which is one of the more fully developed pieces on Paradigmension, moving from an ambient intro through to changing beats and closing with a further minute of ambience. Organic Circuit. One of the things that feels very un-FSOL about AI is just how major key a lot of it is. Organic Circuit is another synth piece for happy sounding arpeggios and pads. Resist Not. A rare example of acoustic sounds appearing on Paradigmension, Resist Not features a thumb piano loop playing throughout, over which warm percussion clatters, electric guitar notes shimmer, and occasional synth pads cut through. Of everything on the album, this one reminds me most of FSOL due to its unconventional combination of instrumentation and electronics. Cycliptic. A reprise of album opener A Cyclic Experience with a heavier rhythm due to the appearance of live drums. That's your lot for this week. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the video and on the music. Go give that AI album a listen, see what you reckon to it. It's a bit of an oddity. Leave me a comment down below. Leave me a like, a subscribe, share this with someone. All that kind of really helps my video, really helps the channel. Appreciate all the support, as always. I will be back next week looking at 1 album and 3 albums at the same time. So do join me for that.